Subscribe, motherfucker.
Good morning, everybody. It is Friday morning, and I have been up since like 3. It's like 10 o'clock now, but I woke up and had some inspiration to write some halftime stuff, which normally, if you know me and my music, it's pretty difficult to make, but I think that I did okay, and it's progress. So what we're gonna do is I'm going to play the tune for you guys. I'm gonna have the tricks to edit with that, and then once that's all said and done, we'll actually go and hop into the DAW and I'll show you how I threw it together. If you guys like the video, then please make sure to subscribe and enjoy the content and all that stuff. It helps me out with the channel. And don't forget that we got a giveaway going on. There's more info in the description. Let's hop to it.
What's up, guys? It's Wednesday. Today we are at my old stomping grounds, Twist and Shout, and this is where I used to coach. This is where I pretty much cultivated a lot of my tumbling teaching skills and also landed a lot of my first tricks. So they've got a clinic going on right now, so I'm gonna head over to the trampoline, but let's go ahead and get these flips in.
All right, hope you guys like the tricks. Recovery is going pretty well. I'm just happy to be able to be moving. I'm starting to remember some of the, I guess, technique or some of the application stuff and finding my air awareness, and then also like how to like make quick changes in the moment, like mid flip or like mid in the middle of a move or something. So it's cool. I got a long ways to go, but yeah, so let's talk about this beat. It came together at 3 in the morning today. I woke up and I had a specific Ivy Lab tune in mind. As you can see, I'm using it as a reference track called Eyes Down. And the main thing that I wanted to put together before anything else was the drums. And it's almost like a replica, like rhythm-wise, about what's going on, but I think that I was just trying to see if I could understand the vibe. And that's really been a big thing that I've been working on the past like couple years. Sorry, I'm at a piano, obviously I'm not at home, but that's been like a huge thing for me, is figuring out how to get the halftime swing or how to get these drums to work well together. So by themselves, they sound like this. And that's with the filter on it, but we'll talk about that in a second. I'm in. I don't know. I really like it. This is one of my favorite kinds of beats, so that's why I'm really excited to talk about this. So I guess if we just start with the kick and snare, it's actually pretty simple. I pulled a kick sample from my library, and if I were to turn all this other stuff off, it's gonna sound like this. I'm not really gonna talk a whole lot about the sound design stuff today, guys, just because I have videos on everything that you will want to know how to do. It's just, you gotta kind of go look for it. But I started with this kick, which sounds like this. And it's a little bit thicker, but after adding this processing to it, which is just a combination of distortion, EQ, and compression, and then like some last minute stuff, which is clipping and limiting, it sounds like this, which is pretty thick and chunky. And so I took that, let me turn that off, and then we ended up with this kick, which I did a little bit more processing to, and I'll tell you why. The biggest thing with it is that by itself, it was just a little bit too meaty still. And so it's a little bit kind of abrasive in that way. And so this is just to try to mellow things out. And when I was first doing this project, like without the limiters and stuff, it was actually okay. But once I started trying to get this tune as loud as I could, as you'll see whenever we get to the mastering section, I had to pull the kick back quite a lot in order for it to seem like it has space without it making it break through the limiter, which in some cases it might still be. This is an unfinished project, but that's what I was trying to do in order to get that to work. So what I changed here was I actually tuned the kick. Normally I do that first, but I did that now. And then I actually pulled back a little bit on some of the transient and then also the tail end of that. And then the EQ is kind of just shaping it in a weird kind of way. There's a lot of like mid stuff that's happening that gives this like the poof, which makes it sound super electronic. So sometimes pulling out your low mids in that way can kind of help. And then I pulled out the top end of this and replaced it with some hats that we'll talk about on the percussive side of things here in just a sec. So the snare is a lot more straightforward. There's some saturation that's going on, and then I'm using a vocoder to add a little bit of space. And this is actually a pretty handy tool that Hudson Lee actually turned me on to. So shout out to you. Thank you so much for showing me this cool trick. But this actually gives it a little bit of tail end. Let's go ahead and 100% that. So it's a pretty cool way to get like some stereo, but also get like some kind of noisy layers that are going on. And it's not really anything that's like that big or groundbreaking, but to me, it sounds a lot nicer in that way. So with EQ, I didn't have to do much for this. It was already kind of ready to go. Just a little bit of shaping and boosting that high mids. Put some OTT on this, but granted, I did a little bit of work to this, so it's at a really low percent, and then I've also pulled the threshold up, that's the way that I liked it to sound, and then I added some glue compression that's just kind of like this. And I'm actually, instead of turning the peak clip on and then boosting everything up, I've been experimenting with gain staging, and I think that it's actually been helping a lot. So gain staging isn't really necessary, but in certain cases, depending on what you're trying to do, it can actually be helpful. We can talk about that another time though. But the kick and snare together kind of sound like this. And one thing that I really want to get into right here, just to kind of like make sure that like I'm not leaving anything behind, is that the two main elements that are really setting this rhythm are the secondary, or like the ghost kick and then the ghost snare. So if you look at this kick right here, the fourth beat would be right here. So we're moving it over and turning that into a triplet. And then we're doing the same placement over here for that second snare. So it's almost like a pattern of double kick, double snare, double kick, snare, double kick, double snare. I guess somebody's mowing a lawn today on a Friday morning, so sorry about that. But this is really important because like you don't actually have to overdo the swing aspect of it. You can just take like one piece of this one particular element, and that will actually set the precedence for having a good rhythm or a really tight groove. And I find that with swingy type beats, if you're trying to keep everything like in a consistent groove and then like you want to add melodies and harmonies on top of it, this makes it really easy for you to keep that stuff in time, because if you've got like really swung drums and you try to add maybe like a melody or arpeggiator to it, you have to do a lot of legwork within the MIDI editor in order to line things up with the kick and snare. So doing it this way is a lot more simple, but I also think that it worked out really well. Maybe I got lucky, totally fine. Now, I did say that I referenced the IB Lab tune. I'm not going to play it because of copyright issues, but I do think that the drum section on here has a little bit more swing to it, but my tune is also faster. So the faster your tune is, like the more swing that you can get away with, because it makes everything seem like it's more pushed together. So if you've got a slower thing, you kind of want to back off of the swing. And that's kind of something that I got from Copycat. Not to just like throw out names and stuff, but that was like a key tip that I think that he taught me a long time ago. I wish that like I had a little bit more awareness when he was showing me this stuff, because like now it's like a bunch of aha moments where I'm like, I don't get it. Oh, so I'm glad that I got it to it at some point. Let's go ahead and talk about the percussion now. I'm gonna go ahead and start from the main section. It sounds like this. All right, so the first thing that I actually added to this was this closed hi-hat, which is just hitting on every bar or every beat. It's nothing too crazy. There's a delay that's going on right here. There's actually two. The first delay is actually giving this a little bit more metallic feel because of the short delay. And then the second one is just a little bit swung at 3% that is on every third beat. So it's 1/3 of a beat and then pushed forward a little bit. You don't really even need that, to be honest. You can just get away with this. But using the delay, it kind of has that rolling effect where everything kind of seems like it's, you know, bouncing on top of each other. And I think that like for making beats with swing, I think that using a delay with short feedback is a great tool to kind of implement some of those ideas. And you can also get away with putting your beats or putting your sounds on grid and then using the delay or using a track delay or something like that in order to kind of move everything over. So the second thing that I did was added this little thing. That's literally just by itself. I think that I just turned the volume down. It sounded pretty good to me, honestly. And then at the end of every phrase, I have this open hi-hat as well. So there is this other little hat pattern that's going on right here. And this is more for helping the kick. So if you look right here, and then you look at the white things right here, you'll see that these are aligned with the kick. And that's what I was talking about from before. Like you can layer this on grid and like create this kind of like flam. You know what I'm talking about, that kind of effect. But I find that I kind of wanted them to be together so that way they're kind of playing in time, and that kind of worked out better for me. The next thing that we have over here is this little guy, which is just a tambourine, I think. And everything on here is actually pretty much on grid. So really the biggest factors that are giving this entire beat the swing aspect is just the kick and snare pattern, and then the small delay that's very like barely even noticeable within the hat pattern. There are two other elements that we have over here, which is just kind of like a ride to emphasize the groove. And I will say that there's some stereo processing on this with just a Haas effect, so nothing too crazy. And then the last thing that we have is the shaker pattern that sounds like this. And this is so quiet that you can barely even notice it anyways, but I kind of just wanted to have a little bit of emphasis whenever we pulled the rhythm to that particular time. But for some reason, like I have such a hard time like implementing shakers, so I wanted to hide the mix because I couldn't get it to sit quite as well as I wanted to, but I also like didn't want to give up on the idea. So it's kind of chilling in the background. You can't really hear it that well when everything else is playing, but I do think that it adds a little bit of character to the rest of the tune. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for the percussion aspect of this. This project isn't too terribly large, so there's that. Let's go ahead and talk about the bass now. It's actually only two sounds. This thing isn't being used, but this right here is probably where I spent most of my time, even though it's a pretty simple sound. And that's kind of like one of the beautiful things about chasing an Ivy Lab sound is realizing that they use so few elements, but they sound so good. And even then, like I played my tune in comparison to that tune in particular, and I noticed like so many differences, and their drums are still heavier than mine, and there's a lot of mixed stuff to kind of catch up on. But at the same time, like I'm just trying to capture the essence and then make it my own, if that makes sense. I'm not necessarily trying to recopy or mimic the entire song. So this sound is just a simple respace. It sounds like this. There is a filter over that right now, so let's go ahead and go somewhere where that's not. There we go. And for the most part, it's just a like super layered saw wave. But you can see here that after the distortion is applied, I'm doing two kinds of filtering, which could be overkill, but I think it works pretty well. So the first thing is that we've got a notch right here. And one of the biggest things that I can tell you that you can use to make how do you say, like sub basses that have a lot of harmonics more usable is to cut the middle. And it seems like such a rudimentary tool, but the more that you cut the middle, you can actually maintain some of the high end and still have some of the sub left over with like some subtle harmonics. And I just think that it's like one of those like secret sauce magic tools. So give it a try, especially if you have like really thick sounds like this, because back in the day, which wasn't too long ago actually, I would just try to make a really chunky sound and then have it like completely flat over that. It doesn't work out so well just because like the low mids is where the mud is, so cut it out. Then I kind of refortified that with a high pass filter. And again, like it wasn't like a premeditated formula. It was just listening to the sound and shaping it. And I did a lot of playing with this and figuring it out. On my Comprehensive Guide to Neurobase tutorial, season 3, you will notice that like changing the cutoff really makes a dramatic difference of these types of sounds, especially respaces. So kind of just find a sweet spot for you and see how you can implement that. So finally, I cut all the low ends off of that, and then I just used a single sine wave or saw wave with a low pass filter to kind of make sure that that's fortified. Now over here, I've got a couple things going on. There's a stereo that's making sure that the low end is in mono, even though I don't really, that's kind of redundant, but there's a bit crusher over on the top end that gives it a little bit of extra crunch. Very subtle, but it's just, again, something that I'm trying to shape with like a fine chisel. There is some chorus over here that's macroed, and I'm not using that except for when the pitch bend goes up, so you'll notice that little tearing sound. And this is a cool trick that I showed on one of my YouTube shorts, but what this does is you turn the spread all the way down, you put the taps to 3, and you turn the rate all the way down, and then it actually gives you that really cool flanging effect that is just kind of like used for a quick moment as opposed to like over the entire sound, if that makes sense. I don't know, I just like it. So then we've got some more kind of dipping over here. It's just to try to control it. And the thing that I've noticed is that whenever you start pushing your sub into a limiter or into compression and into all that stuff, like obviously it gives you a lot of extra character and all that. So you'll see me doing a lot of dipping, constant cutting in order to try to keep that clean. So for just poops and giggles, there's an extra stereo over here. It's really not necessary, so don't worry about that. And then there's a limiter that, again, it's not really necessary. It's just something that I throw on every sound just to be safe. The outside processing looks like this, but I mean, if you were to listen to this, like you can see why. And right now we've got the big limiters over here that it's really pushing the sound up. But if you take a listen to, like if I were to turn this EQ off, you can see that it gets like a lot more muddy. So this makes it way cleaner. It is somewhat surgical, but it's really just trying to figure out what is making it kind of cluttered in that sense and then trying to push it out of the way. So that's just, you know, an easy thing to do. I've got an OTT right here, pretty much standard, just a really low percent to give it a little bit of extra color. And then this is actually only being used for the second part of the tune, where the melodies and stuff come in. So that would be like right here. Yeah, so it's off, and then I just automate it on. That way it just makes it a little bit easier to do. There is some clipping that's happening with this, some soft clipping rather, so this is just to try to control the dynamics. Again, I wanted to try to make this tune as loud as possible without it breaking, so the more flat that you get your entire signal, the more that you can push it up. Let it be known on that aspect. All right, so the next thing that we have are the musical things. The first thing that we start off with is this cool little bell right here, and it's just this patch. I guess I should have explained that first, but it's this patch, but there is a multi-pass on here that's making it do some cool kind of movement. By itself, it sounds like this. So I'm not really going to get into the delay shifter easy patch just because it goes into like the generative aspect of tutorials that I've covered. This stuff is available on my website for Eternum. It's got just a bunch of presets that both have neurobases and generator presets for multipass, snap heap, and phase plant all together. You can find more about that on my website, but let's continue. So this is just a cool little melody that I tried to like, you know, have something be played over. And what this is some physical modeling stuff, but you start with a sine wave, you add a little bit of noise over here, and then you set a short decay, mid-sized decay without any sustain, so that way it creates kind of like a bell. Then we've got a couple of instances of sine waves over here to kind of push the envelope, no pun intended, to create kind of like, I guess, something that sounds more so like physical modeling. So it's just AM modulation. So if you turn all this stuff off and then you turn this on, It kind of just gives it a little bit of that. You add some reverb to this at a really soft rate, and then you create a custom comb filter. At the bottom, I've got some key tracking, and this is just a duplicate patch, so these two are the exact same. But when you have the combination of white noise, like just a tad white noise with a little bit of reverb tail, then it gives it kind of like that, I guess, like wind chime pipe type sound, and I like that sound quite a bit. So this is just some chorus in the middle along with some delay on the post-processing, nothing crazy there. And then I guess this is just like, sometimes when you make these kind of like physical modeling things, it can be super resonant, so having some EQ to try to mellow where most of the melody is being played kind of helps balance that out. And then to further do the balancing aspect, I've got some compression and limiting. So yeah, I made this part first, and then I tried to figure out something to do for the intro, and that's where that came in, but I'll talk more about that here in just a second. So the other melodic stuff that I added was actually like late to the party. I was just trying to find more interesting things. This is really simple. It's just a square bell pluck. You start with a square wave, you've got another square wave at the bottom where the phase is rotated a bit, and then there is just a little bit of a regular sine wave to kind of have a fundamental. And then what I did was I gave it a unison and turned the spread all the way up so that way it was really wide. And then I have a notch filter to kind of take out some of those resonances, because if you listen to this by itself, then it's kind of prominent in that way. So this is helping with the envelope to make it more so like a bell. There's the chorus that's making it really wide. This is high passing everything, because again, like whenever you do stuff that's like super resonant, you have to put a lot of effort into controlling the sound, so that way whenever you're listening to it at high volumes, it doesn't just like blast through the mix and sound super sharp, which this did before I did all this processing to it. Finally, let's go ahead and end it with some delay, a little bit of reverb, and it's pushed super loud because this is really quiet otherwise. Then we've got this little guy, which is kind of like a pad, but this is a really cool trick that I actually want to do a separate video over, but take a listen to this. So this is really cool. It kind of sounds like a metallic pad, and I'll just explain the patch, but you just start off with a triangle wave that's got some unison to it, and then you want to have a slow attack. I added some distortion, that actually happened at the end, and this is kind of low passing this like crazy harmonic right there. Now on this one, what I've done was I added a parallel chain, so this is the dry chain, and on this chain, it's got a pitch shifter that has a randomizer on it. And then I'm sending that through reverb. So what you're getting essentially is a main pad, but then within this pitch shifter kind of moving on its own and being a little bit more quiet, it's kind of making it seem like it's got that metallic aspect, and it works really well because it's kind of a granular effect in that way to make it sound like it's like scraping metal or kind of like just shearing in that sense. So without the EQ, it would be really sharp. And then at the end, I just added some like overall reverb to the whole thing and turned it up. But that's how you can kind of get that cool like video game sounding pad in that way. All right, the other thing that I've got right here, I did zero sound design to this one. It's just the grand piano pad, which is a preset on Bitwig, which I tend to fancy quite a bit. I changed some of the macros on here, but that sounds like this. It's really cool actually. And I just kind of like the relationship between like these sounds that you have on here, because they're kind of soft in contrast to the bass that we have, and then also the drums, right? So I don't know, it does make it like, I am kind of playing along the line of cheesy here, but at the same time, like I liked it, and it happened within a day. So here's where that is. The next thing that we've got is from the Copycat sample pack, and I just pulled this chord out and then tuned it. It's really quiet, but it's just a little bit of extra character to that, and again, it's really like not even that important. I bet you would never notice that if I hadn't showed you that, and you probably could barely even hear it from there. This is just white noise over the whole thing, so when the main section plays, we've got a little bit of... And using like really quiet white noise is a great way to kind of sandwich the rest of your tune. So like if your tune seems overall dark and like your main bass isn't being bright enough, or maybe your hats aren't bright enough, then you can use some heavy sidechained noise over the top to kind of give everything that extra layer of like high-end frosting. I don't know, works for me. Give it a try, you'll see what I mean. The last thing that we have for the musical aspect is this little choir, and I love choirs. I don't know, this is my thing. But it sounds like that. You pretty much just go into here. I usually use the Gregorian choir. There's a little bit of white noise over here. You put some reverb on it, and then you bandpass the heck out of it, and that's pretty much all you do. But what I went and did to make it a little bit extra spicy is I've added some convolution or convolver. I convolved it with this dark vinyl, and this actually makes a big difference. So if you listen to this without, it sounds kind of clean even with the bandpass over it, but once this is added to it, it kind of gives it that more like lo-fi-ish, kind of like that underwater type pad thing. Funny enough, so if you listen to the pad or the choir that you hear on Eyes Down from Ivy Lab, I'm like 90% sure that it's a preset from Omnisphere, and I actually used it in my Nightmares tune. See if you can find it, but I really think that it's an Omnisphere patch. It doesn't really matter, but it's just kind of funny to like point those things out. This isn't musical, it's just a rhythmic hit. Just something to kind of reset the rhythm every time. It's a WASD Exotic Pro 5 Sci-Fi. I literally just typed in like sound effects and then found that. So sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you end up preset surfing or sample surfing forever, and that's just the way the game goes. Let's see, there's only a couple more things to cover within this project. This is a soundscape that I made. I've got plenty of videos on how to make soundscapes, but it sounds like this. Love it. I think that I actually made this, I want to say that I actually made this for a Discord pack, which you can go to the Discord and download it, but it's something that I gave out for free, I just don't remember where. I want to say that it's for the Discord Year 2 pack, but you can take that, high pass it, give it some reverb, or if you want to make your own, just go watch how to make atmospheric texture / horror soundscapes or something like that. It's in a playlist that's on my website or on my YouTube channel, so you can go and find that. I'll probably leave a link in the description, but yeah, nothing crazy. Then the last thing that we've got on this entire project is just this riser, which is just a sample, which is just nothing crazy. So there's a couple of things that I did do on here that I do want to mention outside of the sound design. This is what my sidechain looks like. I do volume sidechaining as opposed to sidechain compression. We had a lot of talks about that. Nothing is really happening on these other things other than that sidechain group. But one thing that I did do that I'm trying to like balance out and trying to incorporate more is using reverb on my drums on the entire kit. So if you listen to this layer, I'm just sending the drum chain to this reverb and it sounds like this. It's really quiet, but it does add some character if, I don't know, to me it adds some character to the overall kit. Man, I love this loop. I think for my high tier patrons, I'll probably just put the drum loop out if you guys want to download that. So if you guys didn't know, for the high tier patron list that I've launched, it's called Alckemy. What I do is I post the tunes that I make in the high tier Discord. And so I've already got a tune up there. I've got some exclusive patches that are already readily available for download. But I think that I'm going to put the drum loop up on here just because it's something that I want to share and like give people access to, whether you want to study it or use it or whatever. So look for that later if you're a high tier patron. But yeah, there's some like basic like arrangement tools. So like filtering in the drums. Everything is kind of filtered to there until it comes in later. That high pass filter is actually on the master, and that's just a cool way to build tension if you don't really know what else to do. So as opposed to like creating this huge thing, what I like to do instead is just like start with the ambience and texture, and then over time just give it a little bit of high pass, and that way whenever the main section comes in, it's full frequency and it's actually going to sound a little bit better. So I know that I give you guys a lot of crap on tune feedback about how to do this, but what I do personally for this is I turn the intro down by 1.7 decibels is what I've done on this. It's very typical for people to overdo it, so they'll go like -6 and then go to 0, and I would highly recommend that you don't do that. This is designed to be subtle, that you don't consciously notice it, but you feel it. And so by making the intro just a little bit more quiet as it goes into as it goes into the main section or whatever, you can, instead of boost the main section, you just kind of leave it at 0, and that's something that you can try. But again, be careful with that, because like you don't really want to surprise your listeners like with a crazy contrasting amount of volume. For one, it's really bad for their ears, but two, it can throw you off in a way that's not really pleasant. I'd say like 3 decibels would be the maximum. That's just a guideline. That's just what I would recommend. It's not set in stone, but take it with a grain of salt. But anyways, that's a cool little trick that I did. So the last thing that I want to talk about that I did on here, this EQ isn't doing anything, is I'm using 2 limiters, and I'm starting to understand why you want a faster limiter. And what I mean by faster limiter is having a really fast attack and release, because what I've done right here is I turned this down really quiet, and I boosted this up until it just started getting like right under peaking. So if we turn this off, it sounds like this. And it's not completely flat, but that's okay. And this limiter has a different style, and these do make a difference. They have very big characteristics, and it's just something that you'll have to play with. But the first limiter is set to punchy with a really late attack and a fast release, and I'm boosting the signal by 10 decibels. And the reason why I'm not just using one limiter is because I want them to do, for one, 2 different things, but I've also, I guess, heard from several sources that if you have a single limiter and you push it too hard, then it makes it too hard for the limiter to kind of like do the job that it's supposed to do, right? So I've actually boosted that up, and then I added a second limiter that is meant to be transparent. So this is designed to push this as loud as it can go without breaking the sound. And even then, if you listen to the before and after, like I'm not going to try to point that out, but you can tell that this does break the sound just a bit. But you can see here that the attack and release on this, and the transients and the release, are as quick as possible, and that's because I really want the limiter to work as fast as possible, where it will duck the sound and then bring it back up without doing any kind of distortion or coloring. But I'm able to get a pretty loud mix. It's not the loudest, but it'll get up to like -6.5. In comparison, the Ivy Lab tune sits around -6.2, 6.3, so I try to get a competitive mix in that way. Even still, it's not going to be as loud as the other tune, and it's not going to be that big of a difference, but I guess for like streaming purposes or something, then I want to say it's -7, it might be -14, I don't remember, but I don't know, I just shoot for -7 LUFS for the loudness factor aspect to that. But yeah, that's pretty much the track. There's not really a whole lot else. I didn't really do, oh, there's a bass that I forgot to talk about, but there's not really any point of talking about it. It's just this sound right here, which is kind of like a sound design highlight, but I literally just pulled it from a sample that I made from a long time ago, which sounds like this. So I added some filtering to it oh, come on, we're over here. Over here. Oh, it's on this. So I just did some notch filtering to it to kind of mimic the movement of that, and then I balanced it out. But this is Alckemy Bass 164. Let me see if this is part of a pack. Yeah, let me see. Bass hits. Okay, so this is part of the Aberrance pack. So I still use this from time to time, every once in a while, but it's nothing too crazy. This is available on my website as well. It's got a bunch of bass hits in it, and every once in a while I just pull from that. So yeah, guys, that's pretty much it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the tune. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the tricks. This is something that I'm going to try to do, maybe not to this extent, but something I'm going to try to be uploading every week. Tuesday is the goal. I might switch my training to Wednesday, and that will kind of shift everything. But I'm still going to try to upload this stuff once a week, give you guys something to download for the high tier patrons, but also give you guys something to be both educated and entertained by. If you like this video, do me a favor. Please interact with it. I love comments. I love the discussion aspect of it. What do you guys think? Did I get close to the Ivy Lab vibe, or am I just biting too hard? I'm totally okay with either one. I'm just doing me. But yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one.